Dear Americans and Nancy Grace, this is couldn't make this up. This is real, and it's how they were used remotely. The former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, has roles with names at locations like at body dumping spots and a serial killers, and with uses of him in the prisons, like Sandy Hook has a prison campus. They have roles with their patients and criminals before they were caught. Also with doctors with those places. Also with the Whiting forensics. And then again through time with interbranch family members and overt criminal enterprises and private ones at the same time. For remote uses of tactically denatured, sickly distinctly till, but sickly non-distinctly all the campuses. And how they got away with that is also recorded. But we are preemptively prevented free speech. Per Connecticut, WFSB has roles with this. Also, with the topic of the involvements of it with child pornography. There are women involved with Hartford courts and their family members with all military also from Weathersfield and from West Hartford who are involved with leaders of the kids, policing of the schools, with medical community, foreign and domestic, planting fabricated audio and video transcripts, roles of predicate acts methods with the individualized branches, but also grouped and also together. And with the exceptions tied to them, as fire campuses and medical campuses are also involved with this. They have intelligence community involved with families next to the Hartford Hospital and on off it with the mental health experts and drug countering bodies in medicines bodies that are criminally foreign influence with their patients and criminals and families before they were caught. They were in that place together. They've been planting evidences between campuses, public and private, making little fake exceptions of people knowing each other, mixed with completely that fake too. That's why they had their motivations are also recorded. They also have other natures of organized crime bodies. They have the witness protection program and all sides in criminal and civil cases leading up to the World Trade Center attack in Manhattan, as names involved with Connecticut interbranch and overt criminal enterprises with those same names, private ones, and where and how they employ consciously a breaching method more sophisticated than our agencies. This is former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, in his defending capacities before the World Trade Center attack. He and Hartford courts and the Britain courts affected confessions and requests to help from me per their roles with Dean Alford, people associated with Dean Alford and a Dean Judd from Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College. And the intelligence community has roles next to those locations with overt criminal enterprises, with predicate acts with them, even if they are undercover. And they're not hiding that. Per they're pretending that's what their motive is, because they've been planting predicate acts between campuses. A whole bunch of people who confessed, recorded at Trinity College, and demonstrated, confirmed they made fake exceptions of knowing me so they could plant evidences timed at a corner of a building where I'm going to see them never be able to counter whatever the hell, then they hid what I said and changed. But other people do this for them. And I don't even know their names. But we could get them. One of them is a Joshua Stryker. I never had a conversation with my life. It wasn't even my grade. They probably took a picture the one time I was there. Then, in other words, with the day after, a girl was in that same spot. And they would even call me to the office from to do this. And this goes back to each campus I went to. I caught them with a principal child abuser involved with more before he was caught. They forced that by falsifying police reports against me with the police, fake conversations with me as ones that I never had classes with, but they went to schools I went, apparently. Because there was one exception I saw of Eric Mendez one time, one day, at Wethersfield High School, and one day, both times real fast incident. And he called me on the phone as one of the people who that way confirmed, demonstrated, recorded has roles of wire crimes with Hartford police families, Newington police families, Wethersfield police families, a police chiefs retired involved with wire crimes in the same house. And they're recorded consciously bringing it up and then pretending it's personal. All exceptions they use too. Differentially worse. That. Because of the involvements of foreign bodies. This is with the World Trade Center attack. They attached I'm divorced, but they attached my wife, who called Whiting Forensics. They moved me out of the right before there was problems. There was going to be problems, and because it was confessions, and there were people planting sequences. They implied that some of those prisoners, I have no criminal record. They made up things when I caught them with a principal child abuser. The networks, the communications locations, not just networks. They recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. When collusions with psychopath takes on calmness, psychopath takes on aggression. This is relevant, in other words, when that's not entertained with short words, that person is sensed and exploited is the foundation of this, where and how they employ criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and of negative treatments, and where how nature employs identity relative to positive and negative simultaneously. Nature employs individual difference, group differences, male, female, different color eyes, black pupils, whites of eyes, same exact. Other species, the same way. Species body, group differences, individual body of the species body, individual. One identity of value / value progression is the identity of space / existence, is the identity of order that is still, also positive unto itself, not as criminal insidiousness, nature of positive. How could things like that were entrenched with the laws, forced roles with it, or that person was sentenced, like slavery, like witch trials, or that person was blaming other things, others, or selves for the real causes of the negative value, nature, progressions, acts, and natures with that worse. And because that's relative to uses that are singularly used too, where and how we can demonstrate. We know that other is communicated than people say, as formal and exceptions tied to them, as the news. News attached me to fake words with themselves, so they could lie about my motivations and theirs, and so they could lie about emotions. For example, to keep emotions, nature has a function by emotions, because if descriptions by them are going to leave out, our uses of descriptions of them are to leave out finite details or the significance of what came first, or the significance of exploitation. Like, for example, use of truth to lie, truth to imply things, where and how forced accepted it was and is integrity that is not integrity. It is criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. I am not a lawyer. There are also, with lawyers, recorded roles with federal evidence is crime. Federal rules of evidence is crime still. and way, so therefore way worse with all sides in criminal and in civil cases, and the victims advocates, people in the hallway of the courts, judges retired and standing, prosecutors retired and standing. This employed a certain type of victim slash hyper victim to speak for the law before it could, while it was still roles with what entrenched was really the worst furtherance of and uses of, also use singular, of the worst natures of organized crime, of the worst natures of criminal insidiousness, like wrongdoers, like people with as fact-chippy nature who with self-value, including how as victims of it worse and how as differential. For example, we're in How the Course of Black People's Whites Advice. He's been forced to entertain, blamed other things. You know, how it is forced to be entertained, having been pretended liberated. One of the ways the breaching method employed this done was the same way it forced the economic positions, not just with slavery as they pretend they believe it defined, control the mind. See, president slash chief. The president's record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. They couldn't fathom how their help was going to be forced not to adapt by what trains them, no matter what side they are. If they try to do, in other words, relative to, for example, to their all treatments of calmness, all treatments of aggression, syntactically, we're in how it counts where we are quality as fact treatment nature. Per the maintenance of criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, slash hyper tactically, and the slash is an identity of volume there too, where we are active. And this is an identity of negative value nature progression that modern countries' names, individually grouped and together, were forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to entertain uses of that name. Not as they name anything other but than by and as which used remotely, hyper criminally foreign influence, specifically to effectively having kept and keeping other things, others, and ourselves blamed for the real causes of that criminal foreign influence, of those criminal foreign influences, uses of them. And so there are so many ways to make hyper positive out of negatives. But we have to offensively shown where they are used remotely, all formal identities of law, all exceptions. And those exceptions, including overt criminal enterprises and killers and people next to their body dumping spots. Even if that was because it was made up the whole story about the serial killer with the West Hartford spot next to Central Connecticut State University. There are people involved with that who call up police stations. And for example, the police have been with other police forms. The FBI has roles with Wethersfield Police and State Police and their families, intercities and interstates, and military police forms. Had roles leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and sense. It is not their honest motivations when people speak about and get involved with other people's business online. The name Ray Cololo was typed on my YouTube, whether that was really him or one of the Ray Cololos or not. They're also, anyway, they're recorded involved with wire crime acts and methods and federal rules crimes, federal rules of evidences crimes, methods, whole methods of them, and federal evidences crime acts. Therefore, we're way worse. Further with a Phil Cololo that A Bob Chase with Whiting Forensics recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, also with other people there. A whole bunch of people tied to a former Mayor Golden, to his family, recorded involved with Whiting Forensics when I was a kid and when I was an adult. Also with the leaders of campuses and with the names of businesses and locations next to the campuses and homes next to the campuses involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, instances. So it is critical to understand up front, too, where and how American history is about an identity theft, fraud, slander method against everyone, including our founders still. Our founders told us to explain how they wanted nothing to do with slavery. They wanted us to explain how before they were born, there was the crazy breaching method, human fact, human nature breaching method, a list of laws, a list of database relativity / IES. Relativity / relativities, where and how everything was propagated as the human names, human differences, human difference / differences were propagated, self-cultivated, or that person was sensed and hurt, criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence. Also where and how descriptions of it were employed to blame other things, others, ourselves, to get away with it, and to believe it. But even though it knew, nature would keep demonstrating. For example, per function by the emotions. If someone tries to describe emotions, and they're doing so to leave out or to enable someone, or enabling, if they realize or not, other people, to leave out or make up finite details, replace actual ones, or group ones, and or let out simultaneous details. Emotions descriptively are about the simultaneous / hyper simultaneous, or the person's lying. The whole group could lie together. That's what the breaching method made only capable of being, per how it knew that nature would demonstrate criminally foreign influenced use / S of the sciences, abridged from their state where that had been revealed before the criminally foreign influenced. Tactically, a hyper criminally foreign influence, possession / possessions over certain quality, over the quality / qualities, aspect / aspects in nature / natures, now criminal insidiousness natures, like wrongdoers, wrongdoing, criminal enterprises, bodies individually grouped and together, overt ones and private ones, originally and still. And so it employed people to have hunger. In the suburbs, it were designed before America's founders were born. Tactically denatured. Sustained against the Native Americans was the same breaching method, distinctly against the colonists. Everyone against everyone in themselves, and or unities as roles too, defended as identities individually grouped and together, reliant upon criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and of negative fact treatment nature, quality aspects of natures, used by others, not just by themselves. With the defensive logic in that theater called freedom or integrity, that suits and ties, counters, and exceptions as collusions, and with reference to the difference of that. Honest science would have revealed free science would have revealed the answers that nature demonstrates, the order it demonstrates that we could know them in. So in the World Trade Center attack were rolls with names on off all sides of criminal and civil cases in Connecticut. Also since then, also with victims and victims advocates and people associated with them, lawyers on both sides, and that difference used by all of them as roles of federal evidence as crimes. Federal rules of evidence as crimes still. Therefore, way worse. Predicate acts. I'm not even a lawyer. So we have to get, they switch names. It's also relative to how they could get away with, you know, to the question millions of Americans want, how they could get away with pretending integrity of the law. Well, we could see knowing that was a breaching method that designed slavery entrenched north and south before our founders were born. Already had the design of the suburbs set up. Already had tactically denatured what nature demonstrates more probably and demonstrably the Native Americans had cultivated, which is how to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, natures, all kind of food crops, and the ground's identity of relationship to itself, and it to its parts individually grouped together, water. In other words, where did these seeds come from? You can't just plant them now and they're going to grow anywhere. All the diversity of life came from an identity of the grounds, identity of the relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that, which has been replaced by logic systems tactically ulterior from its own. Three things: tactically criminally foreign influenced / hypercriminally foreign influenced. And this is relative, not just to how we are. Cell body, cell nucleus, cell wall, / as these bodies, cell individual, group, difference, / as. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, is one of the co-defendants in a 2006 district court case, who non-verbally confirmed he's also rolls with one of the people before the World Trade Center attack in Connecticut, who affected confessions from the family and intimate ties of Hartford courts and people associated with them. And they said it was with New Britain Superior Court. And one of the girls from the Hartford court said he was going to get in trouble for that, and Eric Burgess. And she doesn't even know the confessions he asked me for help tied to a Dean Judd. And we said was his son. I had no conversations with him. I mean, I did not respond. And these are people who rose with the deposition of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants, various natures of federal criminals, and their family members. Also as people from Wethersfield through time involved with those West Hartford locations, and the names next to the principal's body dumping spot, who had roles also with criminally foreign influenced predicate acts put into databases at campuses I went to, with people attaching, and it's all kind of EMS families, people tied to, and doctors tied to a Leahy family that pretended conversations with me. It's people tied to that confessed, demonstrated, recorded, confirmed. There's a Marco Mancini. There are neighbors of his. I don't even know. And the exceptions, I don't know, but they try to make fake me knowing him in the context where they had roles with the bomb making. I mean, I had roles with it too, but they brought it up. The one that brought when they brought the Marco Mancini into it. The wire crimes were already there. There was, in other words, they've made vertical and horizontal court confessions relative to where and how roles are, with replacing which each age is actually capable of correlating and of communicating. with that which is needed to be communicated for the breaching method through our own. It needs people as mayors, as their kids. At the same time, multi-front. This is against each age of fact-shaping nature through our own. Against themselves through themselves. Also per how it's relative to where and how the names next to the body dumping spots want nothing to do with such as no people don't. But exceptions were and are made for them. Where and how every day things go before courts. That the breaching in modern countries A through Z. The breaching method knew those courts and the police forms and the identities of the law were already collusions. With uses also singularly used effectively of all instances, increasingly with relativity to uses of predicate acts methods at multi-front, at each age of correlation nature, consciously keeping other things, others are ourselves blamed for the real causes of negative value nature, progressive acts nature, and with passions behind it. How that is gotten away with is reliant upon it from the youngest ages. So they have women judges' roles, women investigators' roles, with planting evidences that are digital crimes. People that go on websites, recorded, with people on off the state judicial branch offices, on off the Hartford and West Hartford court. And I mean Hartford and courts and New Britain courts with West Hartford locations. And next to campuses and next to parks. People with the parks and recs in their locations in Wethersfield. All the programs in every city. If you start using metaphysics properly, you're being led by the metaphysic. You're being led by the hyper simultaneous, which is needed to be discerned by honest science, because of how being an individual is being a simultaneous nature, distinctly from how the species body, invisible but still discernible too, know how the other species bodies also have the same differences like male, female, and have it distinctly, but also not distinctly. Because nature is showing us its distinct, non-distinct, and hyper simultaneous identity of relativity as its own, as the identity of space/existence, being the way it's demonstrating perfect, better than perfect. That's how we answer our questions. So we have needs to have experts on things to figure out when people are lying. The breaching method effectively employed such truths to be used for lies. It is manifest where people speak about evidence and with passions and or where they are calm. No one should be calm relative to how before our founders were born, designed for a torture/extortion/slavery method and a screening method that had roles also forced, tricked, or persuaded to pretend other, to screen the breaching method, and or to keep blame on other things, others, ourselves, with the breaching method and it knew effect nature would continually demonstrate about the breaching method. Know how the breaching method, even though it's recorded, apart with what Jim Crow laws and slavery was about. It's about who's lying about George Washington. He wanted nothing to do with slavery. But and James Madison. They wanted nothing to do with slavery. They wanted nothing to do with descriptions of them that would leave out why and how. They had to counter extort the other founders. and they had no means to do that, so they only could do it for a real short, quick time. But then the laws were so crazy against everyone, sensing through everyone, they would have been hurt anyway. So then they had to rely on our founders. There were more than 13 colonies, or more than they did 13 points of counter extortion, but everyone remained a slave, sickly distinctly too, to effectively to measure and maintain who would treat slavery as the science properly. That means against everyone. Of course, that means not leaving out how people get sick, hurt, sickly distinctly from that. But where that comes from, too. In other words, to figure out who's doing that right, where it comes from is who's dealing with the metaphysics right. And that means who's dealing with the simultaneous right, who's dealing with the finite right. That means who's dealing with the hyper simultaneous right. The identity of relativity has these distinct bodies of life, also non-distinct and simultaneous, but also has a distinct simultaneous nature. So that's where I'm calling, we need to discern the hyper simultaneous. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling, not only they only share, it's just easier to discern the singular identity the sciences share. Why they're grouped. Why all the cell, nucleus, cell, body, cell wall, /S, the water and gas. These are 5 identities of reception of positive. Nature shows us to discern the difference between temporary / lasting positive, but per its system. And only through that, it as not just the identity of the past, active and what is to come, the hyper simultaneous. It is the value, it is as the value of truth before the order of the finite, as would not and could not juxtapose with the temporary, but one way, hyper simultaneously. All exceptions, exception nature that appear to be in demonstration of other are really in demonstration of the same things and more, like where and how it uses exception nature. Additional ways from how programmers use them, how you use such phenomena, and how a special difference is used by nature. See where we're being prevented, defenses from where and how. Uses of the right to lie as a summary of the law relative to instances and the value of them descriptions. Those are things that never stop being employed by a breaching method. That effectively also tortures, extorts, and keeps enslaved effectively countries grouped, even though they are strong enough to go around the world individually. Grouped, they have been used remotely since they were kids. They don't speak for science with passions and emotions, honestly. So I want everyone to feel and understand them as real people, even though they're not even drawn yet. The people in the picture of the New York City, one of the scenes, with Little Rap Guy and friends, much like the founders of American history, as presidents / chiefs know, and neither one. Unabridged Constitution, heard a voice with unabridged Constitution. If they try to be it, where and how they try to do at the pace. You can't abridge our words. Everyone's got them abridged. That's forced by the law. The law has been written criminally foreign influence. We have to address how that was maintained. Also blamed by other things others themselves, not just the causes of it, not just what it causes and caused, not just uses of it, a singular use of those uses that even they miss. So you guys are letting them adapt with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, with people next to the Connecticut State Capitol. Increasingly, as people that came on my street, there are judges, a whole bunch of judges in various natures of courts involved with drugs and medicines crimes with foreign and domestic families, logic and identity theft, fraud, sequence shifts, federal evidence crimes, federal rules of evidence crimes with foreign and domestic intelligence. And New York and Connecticut, for example, with the Washington people, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, with names on all sides of the campuses. Also, where manifest are things that are spoken about and self-defense. Where self-defended, you think, okay, should be harder rules. We're next to campuses where bad things happen. They're using that where they have roles with the interbranch, with the overt criminal enterprises since they were kids, with various natures of federal criminals before they were caught, pretending passions and emotions together. Religious spots, people pretending passions and emotions together, while tactically delusions raw. So we needed to have experts to be able to dissolve stuff, but they've been already used for all kinds of, when you look at what's actually recorded, cover-ups. That's how whether they're being and having been used remotely, all identities of law and their opinions and convictions, their theories and their tactical delusions. How could you entertain people talking about the theory of relativity? Especially, why would you read it when you have the identity of relativity right here to answer our questions? And better. So we're wastes of time. We have the value of education that over, where people are making opinions, they're with passions and/or as sitcom, but they're as roles with the database involvements since before computers. This word with the word programming. See, the program is hyper native pure, and Native Americans are prevented that grounds identity of relationship to itself, and even to discuss it, even though that's the only way nature can communicate with us. It's not just white people as blacks of eyes, individual, all things, and everything is hyper additive, hyper additional. All exceptions, exception nature and demonstration, same thing too. So in other words, they know how to hurt people and help people to keep self-value uses of employment of all natures of identities. And further, they knew before our founders were born the roles of the breaching method. Worst, that I lost my train of thought. Maxine's thought. Oh, so this is about serial killers. Dear Nancy Grace, on off Fox Connecticut News. Many involved, even if it was made up because they're trained people with the state police, Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, and Trinity College and Hartford. Even though these campuses are filmed 24/7, they've been fabricating audio and video on them. They've been roles with all sides in criminal and civil cases. people from off the campuses, intelligence from off the campuses, but also other countries. Also, where and how there's a possession of their reactions to the extortion, torture of themselves grouped, and slavery of themselves grouped, also as one of the answers to the questions of the souls of the people, even though they're only a cartoon, in the drawings of the boroughs of New York City and of their counter extortion. But this counter extortion is a counter thematic means to get grounded, hyper intelligence, and understanding of the value/value progression. We are relative to its trinity, per the extent we can discern it per science, and to where we could discern, the extent we know there's there's an identity of space/existence. It shares the being distinctly, non-distinctly, and hyper simultaneously all things. Boxing. So boxing, martial arts, and wrestling. Right now, I'll give. If you guys do it to agree, to do it this way. In other words, and we'll get all where I need to if to get to agree. Besides Russia and Ukraine, if we can get China and India and America to work with us, Russia, Ukraine, and boxing, martial arts, and wrestling, where and how they share an identity, where and how we're simultaneously we're practicing to explain, to understand, to explain, and to put in place an industry as hyperpantheism. You guys have to do it this way. In other words, and we have to explain as countries explaining and not allowing people not to explain, not forcing people not to explain or end our roles with it, which has only been standing uses of every name of every modern country. Tactical ulterior from how the identity of space/existence has employed. Uses of the word employment, for example, but our volume science /science is. So boxing, martial arts are in and wrestling are about violence. They're about by the rules. In the ring and by the rules. It's not violence that itself. In other words, violence is being led by fake order. Fake order was shown and is shown means to demonstrate that being and having been their value while they pretended other. And other was their motivations for that. And is their motivations for that. Everywhere the species bystands. Forgiveness is to not leave it out because there is more here. And this is where and how people would rather have people. In other words, this even used the on-off Fox Connecticut News in downtown Hartford, and people along that street have roles with the intelligence community, including judges and prosecutors, their family members, through time since I was a kid, since everyone was a kid, and they do little. They influence people around. In other words, there's a Fred Grisey. Never saw him around the people in my neighborhood. One time he came made a confession demonstrations. They had when there was the transition from middle school to high school. He was involved with People covering up how they have roles with predicate acts with databases, with overt criminal enterprises and various natures of proven federal criminals before they were caught, who were also pretending passions and emotions as strangers against me, also timed where there's no way to respond, and they make fake exceptions and demonstration of the same thing. But kids aren't going to go into being able to counter criminal insidiousness, natures of positives and negatives and collusions, and with not knowing people's names. And this is used as vertical and horizontal confessions, where and how the interbranch are constantly setting up little fake things at locations with the foreign and with overt criminal enterprises, not realizing but realizing to an extent, because we're relative to where and how they're used remotely. So they have names from Wethersfield involved with Wethersfield Interbranch, who also have and the names next to the schools, who are also next to with names of locations next to the schools in Hartford and New Britain, in a way that demonstrates it was through these are people involved with World Trade Center predicate acts, news predicate acts, fake conversation we know, fake doctors, fake conversations with me too that have ties to my street and my area, and they have roles with recent home break-in reports involved with the police forms too, how they juxtapose with Wethersfield police. And through time, also hyper evidential is how when they bring up the police problems with the people, let alone with black slash white slash exception nature. No, different color eyes. So Fox News, please. This is on off WFSB too. These are remote uses of people's defenses of their overall names, grouped, and individuals as what can't defend itself without hurting the directors of the FBI and the agencies and or judges and their family members involved with their locations and the locations next to them. And see, the breaching method knew it would be that way. And knew it could exploit that at other locations. Also, people with the name Spada confessed. Fred Grisey. Last time I saw Antonetta Spada, she's one of the ones with involved with police on off police forums on off Fox Connecticut News involved with predicate acts for child offenders, including sexual, medical, and overt criminal enterprises and private ones at the same time. Roles in leading as names involved with World Trade Center predicate acts, and they forced Saudis to roles with them. And they communicated other. So don't let them hide their individual roles criminally foreign influence since they were kids. As their sources too, from Wethersfield Interbranch has roles with Middletown locations with foreign and domestic military leading up to the World Trade Center attack. They confess, recorded, demonstrated, confirmed with the news too. They pretend they're hiding just how they train state police, how they train police forms, people with the Department of Corrections, criminal justice. They have a whole bunch of people offensively preventing finite details from being handled properly and pretend because they have titles, pretend because there are legitimate readings of laws. Jim Crow laws are but one of the things that they're about when you deal with truths properly about criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and reactions to that and uses of that, or that person was sensed and worse than her with fact-checking nature, relativity to things, about things that everyone's preventing from being discerned. They can't even hear the breeze in New York City. They think it's that which comes from a truck drives by. But before the cities were born, I mean, while the cities were being made, rolls with that slavery method, sickly distinctly against everyone. There were rolls leaving that out with logic. There were rolls self-valued, not realized, self-valuing the Constitution abridged, not realizing the importance of understanding why and how our founders had to counter extort the other founders, and where and how to discern that hyper evidentially recorded. Excuse me. Mother.